we've tested this as much as we could, but we can't beta test it the way we normally would because nobody's writing 3.6 reports yet. All of the information you want to present about your market, it's all in the market section. There is no addenda 30 pages later. If you don't have a mobile app on your iPhone Pro, you'll never be able to write an appraisal ever again. And it's just, that's not true. I don't want people to hear, boy, he turned it in 24 hours. We're going to really be able to speed things up. But then I also don't want people to hear, boy, it took him 8 hours to write this report. That's never going to take off. They've never announced a date for UAD 3.6 and then turned around and said, actually, we're not ready yet. It's not going to happen until a year from now.
Episode 67 of Market Moves with Mark and Jeff, two uninteresting guys talking about very interesting times. A very happy Thanksgiving to listeners out there. Excited to squeeze in this recording for some really topical information here before Thanksgiving. Maybe a lot of folks will be listening during the holiday here, Jeff.
I hope so. A lot of folks listening is always the aspiration of any podcast, Mark, whether interesting guys or not, obviously. But looking forward to it. Looking forward to some good food a little later this week as well. So we'll see if we can pair that. Although I don't know how well we'll compete with football and some of the other things that people may be listening to. Maybe that is true. There's a lot of real estate professional sickos out there that just need to get more real estate information, and especially in these times, Jeff, we talk a lot about it. There's certainly federal monetary policy and all these things, but there's a lot going on in both with real estate sales, with brokers and agents, on the mortgage side, and certainly on the appraisal side is folks are looking towards modernization. On our pod released this morning, we're recording this on the day it was released, we talked about the first UAD 3.6 appraisal form. This is the new appraisal form and updated language that the GSEs are rolling out. Have been working on it for 3, 4, 5 years. And this last week was the day that Adam Winstead delivered an SFREP appraisal, the first of the UAD 3.6 URAR appraisal reports on an actual loan got delivered, right? And so with us is my title, not his, but I think one of the few URAR and UAD 3.6 historians watching and being kind of on the front line from the software vendor side. Remington Jones, I've known Remington for a long time. He is the CEO of SFREP and Appraisal. They're an appraisal software. And they were the software to get first approval, I think, maybe second approval from the GSEs. Yeah, second. Ivory, I think, was the first. But did have the first report delivered to the GSEs coming from them. Remington, welcome to the podcast.
Mark, thank you so much. Jeff, good to see you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so Remington, we were just talking about this backstage, so to speak, and you have been with SFREP since 2009, starting kind of on the ground floor, it seems like, and working your way on up. You said you were taking phone calls from the UAD 2.6, the first UAD iterations in 2011 from folks maybe frustrated and trying to learn that language. Is that right?
Yeah, it's sort of that all-American story that you never really hear anymore, and it's kind of weird to think of myself as living it, but back in 2009, I just moved to North Carolina, and I was looking on Craigslist for job postings, and I answered one for a temporary tech support position, and went out, and Matt, who's now my director of marketing and communications, interviewed me and hired me and put me on the phones. And then a year or two later, I was doing frontline support for that first UAD rollout and helping hold our customers' hands through that new format.
Well, Remington, it gives you such a unique perspective, and the software providers that are meeting these scopes have been working on this for years, in this moment, it seems to me that other than the folks at Fannie and Freddie, you guys are the experts in this process. You've been working on it exponentially longer than anybody else has, and what a great place for appraisers and maybe even real estate brokers and agents out there learning a little bit more about this new appraisal form, you've got a really interesting perspective and seat at the table here to kind of share experience.
I do. I think so. I also get to correct you because you keep calling it a form. It's not a form anymore, Mark. It's a report. It's dynamic. It's not static. No, I'm sorry. I had to do it. People keep doing it to me.
It won't be the first time in this episode that you have to correct me. And I'm like 10 minutes through the Brian Reynolds and Adam podcast that I think was released today. Folks should go check that out. But he got a correction into Adam pretty early. So kudos.
Yeah, I think everybody's enjoying doing that to everybody else whenever they can. It's fun, whenever the GSE representatives are doing a talk or a show and you see them catch themselves and go, wait, but yeah, I definitely think that, it's a small subset of people who are kind of UAD 3.6 experts right now. I do think that us software vendors might be, at least for the time being, I don't expect it to last. Everybody's going to become an expert at this. But since we've been kind of living and breathing this specification for the past 3 years or so, building out our software, I do think we're in a pretty unique position right now where we really know the nuts and bolts of it. Not to say that we're appraisers, as we kind of covered. I'm more on the tech side. I came up through technical support and development and operations. I am not an appraiser, but I am intimately familiar, and my team is intimately familiar with the new format, the new report itself, and how it works.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you guys have been living it and breathing it for 3 years. Appraisers have been hearing about it for a long time, but not only until recently actually able to kind of touch and feel, whether beta versions or just the recently released version. My only beef is you beat me to correcting Mark or picking on him Remington. It's one of those things where I've done the same thing, but you hear people say, and it maybe seem trivial or trite or whatever, but the intention really is for this new format to be a more readable, more user-friendly, reporting format. Obviously, we'll spend some time talking about that, but because of your unique vantage point of having seen and kind of lived through the initial UAD rollout, what we're now calling 2.6, and now we're at 3.6, kind of the next generation or iteration of this thing. What was your perspective in seeing that, in 2011, that 2.6 rollout, as far as how it was handled, contrasted against, the handling of this one? This one feels like it's been coming forever and is maybe just barely getting here now. That other one, the initial rollout may have been a little, I remember it feeling chaotic, but, any change always can be. But what's your perspective on how this go around compares to the first go around?
So first off, hindsight's always 2020, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to look back 10 years on and say, well, they really screwed that thing up. And I think they did the best they could. And I can understand the idea of, well, we want to keep it familiar, and hopefully this will be easier for appraisers if it's the same form they're used to, that same 1004 or 1073 or whatever, and maybe we just change what they put in the fields. And at a glance on paper, that makes sense. That sounds like, that would be an easier transition. But in practice, the idea of, well, what we're going to have them put in those fields are really arcane, confusing acronyms that nobody has ever seen before. They're not some, industry terminology. They're stuff that we're making up for this, to the point where now your report has to include a 2-page addenda that goes over what all the abbreviations actually mean. It does not make for a very readable report. And so I think that, coupled with that first rollout, I don't remember exactly how long they gave us, but it was a much shorter runway where they went, okay, here's this new UAD thing, and now it's required. Everything has to be on this. It was a much faster switchover. And, working in tech support at the time, we basically threw the idea of normal operating hours out the window, and we were all working 10, 12, 14-hour shifts trying to be on the phones, remoted into our users' computers, and help them understand where these, what these new little fields meant and what all these requirements were and how to export this MISMO. And so that was all, as you say, kind of hectic, certainly more abrupt than what they've done this time around. And to their great credit, they sat and watched what happened there and went, this could have gone better. Actually, we should do this better next time. And I do think they have. I'm not here to shill for the GSCs. We do have a working relationship with them, but we do not work, for them. And I do appreciate that they gave us, as an industry, this longer runway where limited production, quote unquote, started on September 8th. And I've seen plenty of chatter about how, well, okay, but nothing actually changed, nothing actually happened, and that's fair. But so starting on September 8th, it was theoretically possible for somebody to submit one of these new reports, but us software vendors and the banks and the AMCs weren't necessarily ready yet. But that was the start of this transition zone, and the end of it's not until a year from now, the beginning of next November. And so having that over, something like 14 months, that's a much better way to ramp up than what happened last time.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's one of those things I think, many, especially appraisers, have been hearing about it for so long. It's almost like I'm sick of hearing about this, but I think your description and to your lived experience makes a lot of sense to me, that it's probably better to give enough lead time that, it turned out that we weren't ready to start delivering reports, early September as scheduled. No problem. We're not, up against a hard deadline by the end of this year, say, for example, to make that abrupt switch like with the prior go around. And, there's probably some pain or some difficulties in running two systems concurrently, overlapping for a while. But, when you're trying to learn a brand new system, having more time to learn it and integrate, generally seems like a better approach than, flipping a switch and then everybody scrambling. It does force the issue, on the one hand, but on the other, I think there's the potential for it to be, problematic and slowing down loans and just causing challenges for everybody to have negative experiences. Whereas, this gives people more time to learn, to understand. There's been education classes, that have been out for some time now. It's a way to ramp up that, didn't happen as much, it seemed, last time. And so to kind of do the postmortem and then, adjust on the next, rollout or iteration, makes a lot of sense to me. And your perspective on that really helps, I think, in seeing how, the first one went, how this one is, seems to be going at this point. And kind of excited to dig into that a little bit deeper too.
Sure. Yeah. And, certainly we software vendors would have appreciated maybe a little more time. Everybody who's watching closely, as Mark mentioned at the top of the call, only, we were the second ones to get verified by the GSCs as capable of producing this new format. Ivory was the first, and they're, one of the newer groups on the scene. And as of time of recording, nobody else is verified yet. And it's sounding like, from what I'm seeing of their published timelines and things, that the earliest we might see another verified vendor is sometime in December. But again, we're still just in limited production. Broad production doesn't start till the end of January, and then the mandate date's not till all the way next November. So it's definitely giving everybody plenty of time to build out the products, the software that we think you'll need to write these new reports. And I guess I will touch on that point. I know there's a lot of frustration and irritation and maybe anger out there at the software vendors for not having something out yet. And I think some of that is a little bit of a misunderstanding about what these timelines have meant. The idea that September 8th wasn't a deadline, it was the opening date. It was the first possible day anything might happen. It wasn't okay, on September 8th, you got to start doing these reports. But it's so, again, we all would have liked a little more time, and I hope people can find it in themselves to maybe be a little bit patient with us as we navigate this new arena with you too. We are the experts, quote unquote, at this point, but it's still a brave new world for us too. All of our software was built around the idea of these old static forms, this 6-page 1004 that never changes. It really was a massive development undertaking to build this dynamic report in this new data set that has all these new data points, and to hook it into all of our existing systems or to write new systems from scratch. We're all still working on that. We have released a version of Appraisal Pro. We're calling it a public beta because we've tested this as much as we could, but we can't beta test it the way we normally would because nobody's writing 3.6 reports yet. And we're going to keep building out new tools and new integrations and improving on it for the next 6-12 months at minimum. And all the other software vendors are too. So I know that nobody wants to give us grace, and that's fine, and I appreciate that, but we wouldn't be upset if you did.
Well, pulling at the thread, of your experience with the 2.6 rollout and here in 3.6 in the URAR, you had said off air, and correct me if I'm paraphrasing this wrong, but that maybe this rollout was the way, and I don't think you were just speaking about the timeframes, but just even the intelligence behind the appraisal language and everything that was rolled out, that this is probably what they should have done back in 2011. And same thing, hindsight 2020, you get something rolled out, you see where there may be mistakes or areas to improve, and you do improve. But there's a lot of appraisers that are skeptical of this change. In fact, most are pretty skeptical of all the changes. Could you expand a little bit on, kind of what you understand, from 2.6 and all of these uniform appraisal data set language initiatives, and how they're improving upon that now?
Sure. So, I mentioned that idea of, well, maybe it makes sense to take that exact same static 1004 and just tweak what we put into the fields. But then what we put into these fields are these arcane, confusing, unintelligible acronyms and weird computer syntax that nobody's used to with semicolons and things. And one of the truly great things about the UAD 3.6 URAR is that there aren't abbreviations anywhere. It's all plain English. It's all drop downs with pre-filled selections to help you get through it quicker. But there's no guessing about what something means. There is no addendum that explains in this big table, here's what all these abbreviations mean, because it just says it right in the report. It's much more readable. And then to kind of the wider idea of this is a report and not a form, it's getting away from this idea of addenda. I've seen a lot of consternation over, they're taking away my text addenda. Where am I supposed to put all my commentary? I can't do this. And what can be hard to tell from looking at those samples that they published online, the PDF sample scenarios, is that everywhere throughout, in every section of the report, it ends with a big field where you can type in what you need to type, say whatever commentary you need to say, and the field just keeps getting bigger as you type, so that you don't have to have extended comments or extra comments back in the back. All of the information you want to present about your market, it's all in the market section. There is no addenda 30 pages later. All your charts are there. All your photos are in the sections where they need to be. And I think that's really important too for, again, for the client, for the legibility. But I truly believe that, once we get through the kind of hiccups in the learning curve and all that, it will cut down on the back and forth and the revision requests between the appraiser and the client. Because today, think about, you submit a report and it seems pretty inevitable that you get a kickback that says, well, you didn't mention this, but you did mention this. It's on page 35 in the text addendum, and they missed that paragraph. Because every appraiser is writing their own report and structuring their addenda, and which addenda comes next is completely kind of free form. It's a free for all. The new report standardizes all that so that the order is always the same. This section always comes after this section, always comes after this section, which means that the people reading the report and acting on the report always know where to find the particular information. It might not be in the same exact page. It's not always going to be on page 5 or on page 7, but it's always going to be in this order, and they can skim through it very quickly and find the relevant section and know that they're seeing everything that's relevant, because there are no addenda at the back of the report to try to hunt for and sort through and connect up with what's up in the main body.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And appraisers understandably get frustrated when, well, I addressed that. Why are they coming back asking me for it? Then, and when you wrote it, you know where you wrote it and how to find it, and you can navigate right to it. But I think you make a really good point that not every appraiser in the current environment puts the same information in the same place. It is kind of a free for all. Does the common addendum where you addressed the things you didn't have room to address on the first or second page. Go at the beginning of the report, buried in the middle, is it at the end? Where within that addendum is the specific piece of information that you're looking for. I think that the readability, really will help for the end users. I'd love your perspective as well, Remington, on, I think I see that as being a potential positive outcome of this new 3.6 reporting format. But there, I imagine, are still some level of standardization as far as data, from the lender and even the GSE's perspective. Do you have any sense or any perspective on what additional benefits to users of the appraisal reports this 3.6 is going to facilitate that wasn't available beyond that, aside from just kind of the readability or the structure that it follows?
Sure. A big one I would say is the UAD compliance API, which is a new feature or service that the GSEs have exposed to all of us software vendors, where once you have written your report, before you upload it to your client, how you do it will depend on your specific software. In ours, it's baked into that MISMO export process. So when you go to export your MISMO 3.6, first it reruns our internal validation to try to catch you if you've missed anything or made any mistakes. But then it generates that output report, and before it gives it to you, it hands it off to the compliance API, and the GSEs run the same checks and compliance checking that they do when it gets uploaded to the UCDP, to the portal itself. But they don't record those results. They show them to you so that you can hopefully not get caught by surprise by some unexpected hard stop or, some warning. And this is, again, a way to try to cut down on that back and forth and those revision requests and streamline things and make it simpler, where you get to find out right away if the GSCs think that there's some issue or some missing field or the kind of thing that would normally generate a revision request. You can immediately fix it, re-export the report, and then once it's past that, upload it to your client.
That makes a lot of sense. And appraisers are used to, obviously different software platforms, but used to having some level of a compliance check like internally already. And so if I'm understanding right, this will basically be what the lender, the underwriter would have gotten and come back to the appraiser saying, hey, we need you to address this, in order to upload to the portal. But the appraiser will have kind of real-time access to that. Am I understanding that correctly through the software providers?
Yeah, it's not quite real-time because the API is expecting a completed report. It can't be run in a partial. So what we have done is try to implement local rules running in our own validation engine that kind of mimic that to try to give you the best we can of a real-time one. Then once you think your report's done and you go to export it, that's when it does that kind of final check, that final sanity check against the GSE's UAD compliance API, shows you those results. Hopefully it's just clean and you can proceed, but maybe it's not, and you can make a couple of changes, try it again, then it's clean and you can go. And, so that takes 5 minutes as opposed to you think you're done, you turn it in, the lender thinks it looks good, they turn it in, the GSC say, well, actually there's a hard stop on this field. And they tell the lender, and the lender goes, okay, and the lender has to go back to you, and it cuts out all these extra steps, and it makes it much faster, more streamlined. And then you're not getting, your rating downgraded with the client because, they got a revision and we didn't want to deal with that and all that jazz. So there has been a lot of effort kind of from a bunch of different directions to try to streamline the whole process. And I know it's a pain to learn a new thing, but it is a new thing that I really do think will help the appraiser write a cleaner report and have a cleaner experience.
I think it's the current report delivery process and in feeding these appraisals into Fannie and Freddie's databases and then getting feedback is a little bit akin to filing your personal tax return, where the IRS sort of seems to know the answer. They have all the data and they're just seeing if you're going to report the right answer, and if you don't, they'll tell you where you missed. I feel like there has been a little bit of that there, and this goes to addressing it. It seems to me. So I'm excited about what you're describing.
Yeah, I really do think there's all these little things that I think will add up to, again, once we're past that initial learning curve, where I think people really will appreciate the new report. And I have heard from some people, it's always exciting to hear from somebody who's actually excited about it and is looking at it and can see the potential and the possibility of, oh, this could be so much better than having to do a 6-page 1004 with a million addenda stuck at the end. And I'm hoping that people actually give it a chance. I know there's also a lot of talk of, well, I don't want to learn this, I'm just going to retire. I think that might be kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And maybe you do feel that way, and that's fine. But really actually look at it before you decide to do that based on hearsay or based on, well, I just don't want to learn something new. It might not be as bad as you think it is.
Well, Remington, let's run through. You were not the one completing the appraisal, and
No.
We certainly have to caveat that and remind everyone. I know we covered that extensively at the beginning of the episode, but I think to the extent you can comment on the process and how this all went down, I think it would be interesting. My read is that Adam Winstead, the appraiser that completed the file, had not been working a lot with your system or with you guys in the 3.6 environment. Is that your understanding?
That's true. He is not a customer of ours. He does not use Appraise It Pro to write his reports, as a matter of course. He was interested in this, in trying it out, and trying out UAD 3.6, I should say. And for the time being, we're one of the only, games in town. And so when this, he was working with the bank and with AIM's dashboard, and when the opportunity arose, we set him up with, we call it a demo, but it's really just, we give you the software free for 6 months, fully functional, so you can play around with it and see if you like it. And that now includes the UAD 3.6 reports as well. And so he downloaded it, played around with it a little bit. Kind of what you said, I don't want to put words in his mouth. Everybody should go watch the interviews with him. It's, that's going to be much more interesting. But my understanding is he played around with our software a little bit on a Thursday. The UAD 3.6 order came in Thursday evening. And then he went out and did his property visit and data collection Friday kind of morning, and then wrote up the report and submitted it Friday evening. So I was also pretty impressed with the, I wasn't expecting it to get turned around in 24 hours, but he was really willing to kind of jump in there feet first. And so again, props to him for, he not only wrote this new report that he had no direct experience with, he wrote it in software that he had no direct experience with either. So he had a little bit of a learning curve kind of in two directions. And I think that's fantastic. But so my understanding is that he, when he did his property visit, he spent a little more time at the property because, mea culpa, we don't have a mobile solution out yet. He didn't use a mobile app or anything to do this, which I do, I appreciate from the perspective of, there's been a lot of talk about, well, you have to go mobile. It's impossible to do it otherwise. That's not true. It'll probably be faster. It might be easier, but you can certainly do it without a special mobile app. We have heard from a lot of people who really don't want to give up their clipboard and tape measure. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to. It might go smoother for you if you do, but it's just another report. You can write it the same way you have been.
Just on that point, I think it's a really important point, and it is because a lot of folks that are opining on a drop in appraiser population as a result of this are basing that aside. I mean, there's no good way to guess. So I appreciate everybody that's using math to try and get to an opinion, but a lot of those are, hey, total this many of their users are mobile users, or this percentage. And so if you aren't a mobile user, you're probably not going to move forward at some high rate. And so I think it's a really important news flash even to a lot of folks that, hey, it's possible to do without. I'm not sure that I allowed that as a possibility even before talking to you here.
Yeah. And I do think maybe that's kind of a little bit of marketing gone awry, or people taking a metaphorical statement as a literal statement. And I think probably the marketing is more, you should go mobile. You're going to have a easier time if you do. But then that has been sort of translated through the telephone game of social media and everything to, you have to, there's no other way to do it. If you don't have a mobile app on your iPhone Pro, you'll never be able to write an appraisal ever again. And it's just, that's not true. so sort of to that point, we're building out kind of a spectrum of offerings where we're publishing, we're working on paper forms that will help somebody do data collection for a UAD 3.6 report. It sounds kind of backwards, but again, we have heard from a lot of our users, I really don't want to deal with an iPhone in the bright sun and in the rain and in the snow. I like my clipboard. I'm perfectly capable of doing this report. I don't want to be railroaded into one specific way of doing it. So we are going to offer documentation and assistive tools that you can print off and keep in your car and clip onto your board and take your notes on to make sure you're catching all the things that this new report's looking for. We're also building a data collection report into Appraisal Pro because we do have some users who like to take Appraisal Pro itself into the field. It was meant originally as a desktop report writing application, but some people just walk the property with a 1004 today, and so we want to have an easy way for them to walk the property with this new report. And so we're building a data collection report that's specific to the URAR that narrows the scope so that they don't have to have the whole dynamic URAR open, but they can do just the subject data collection and then tap a button and it transforms into that full URAR with all the data in it so they can then write the rest of the report. And then we're also partnering with two different mobile app providers, one that is LiDAR first for the people who really want to be cutting edge and they have an iPhone Pro or an iPad Pro and they want to just walk around and scan the property and be in and out. And then one that is not LiDAR first in case they prefer to draw the sketch, quote unquote, by hand, but digitally and do all their data collection as well. So we're really trying to meet people wherever they are in whatever level of comfort they have with technology or with, going digital or going mobile or not, because at the end of the day, we truly believe it's just another report format. You don't have to write it digitally or on your phone or anything like that. You can write it the same way you have been, if you want to.
I'm sure you didn't know you were walking into this hornet's nest, but you somehow were able to hit on the primary alarmist camps, the two primary alarmist camps in appraisal these days, UAD 3.6 and the 24-hour appraisal. You're telling me that a UAD 3.6 was delivered in 24 hours. Oh my goodness. The internet is going wild.
Yeah, I do. I guess I should caution that I don't think that's going to be typical. I think Adam was very excited about the possibility of being one of the first appraisers to do this, so he gave it a little higher priority than he might have. I have spoken with him after the fact, and again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my impression and understanding is that he feels that the idea of a 24-hour appraisal turnaround being the norm is very optimistic, might be the most polite way of putting it. That he really does not see that being the best way to go about things. He thinks that more like the 5-day or the week would be more reasonable to expect as a matter of course. Because to his point, that was a 24-hour turnaround. Basically, all he did was write this one report. He devoted himself to getting familiar with our software. So we kind of got on a tangent, but I was saying, or working towards that, when he walked the property, he said that he took a bunch of extra pictures and really relied on that when he was back at his desk writing the report to make sure he had everything he needed so that he wouldn't have to go back to the property again. But so I think his estimate for the actual time spent writing the report was more like 6 to 8 hours. And that would be a very long report for the typical residential appraiser today. But again, that goes back to one, the software is in its infancy. We have something out that's just enough for you to write a UAD 3.6 report. We don't have that mobile integration yet. We have very few data integrations yet. Like we can't import data from an MLS yet or anything like that. So he wrote it from scratch. He had no templating. He had no canned responses. He had nothing. And he was doing it in unfamiliar software, and he was doing it with this unfamiliar report structure that he'd never worked with before. My impression is that he spent several hours just working through it on the phone with one of our tech support agents remoted into his computer to kind of hold his hand and make sure he could find what he was looking for. So I don't want people to hear, boy, he turned it in 24 hours. We're going to really be able to speed things up. But then I also don't want people to hear, boy, it took him 8 hours to write this report. That's never going to take off. It's two different kind of things we're talking about here.
Yeah. I'd rather not have the caveat because we get better headlines from 24-hour appraisal, Remington. But but of course, there. He had 24 hours to write this thing. That would be 4 times more time than a normal appraisal takes if you spent all waking hours doing it. So it's just fascinating to hear and see. And I think just hearing that it was done in that time period does provide some perspective in how much more work or how much more work isn't the case in completing these UAD 3.6 files. This is not 2 weeks of work to get it out the door and that sort of thing. It's in the ballpark of what the normal or current forms are. So any surprises from the software provider in the submission to the GSEs? Talk to me about life after delivery.
So in the most strict literal sense, life after delivery was just, hey, great job. Okay, get back to work. We have to keep building out new things for it. Because we're in a smaller independent software vendor, we're purely focused on the appraiser's needs. Adam is our customer. We don't have any lender customers or AMC customers, or we're not involved in LOS systems or anything like that. So we don't have a great insight into what went down afterwards. But my impression is there was maybe one round of very minor review of, hey, there's a couple of things that it turns out that compliance API check didn't catch because, we're kind of beta testing the whole industry at this point. So I believe he did have to submit one round of revisions where it was like a half dozen things that the system didn't catch that, we wanted this data point, or, this data point wasn't necessary. He did a quick revision, resubmitted it. I haven't heard anything since then. And then I've lost my train of thought. There was something else you'd asked, and now I can't remember what I wanted to touch on. What was I going to say? I don't know. I'm gone. It'll come back, I'm sure.
Mark has a way of doing that to people at Remington, so don't feel bad. In fact, my biggest problem is it's tempting to ask 4 questions at once, and then like, what all did you ask me about? So, no sweat. As it comes back to you as we converse, please speak up or work that into the conversation. But kind of related to the topic a little bit. I mean, life after the first submission is, boy, that's awesome. Now back to work because we're far from where we want to be, right?
Yeah.
We're obviously still very early days in this, this process. But I'm curious from your perspective, what can or would you recommend that appraisers and maybe even lenders or users of appraisals be doing today to prep for or to make this transition as smooth as possible, do you think?
Definitely. For the appraisers, if you haven't taken those CE classes going over the new report format yet, please do. If you haven't looked at the GSE's data and documentation about it, please do. They both have websites up. Fannie Mae's URL is just a little bit easier to remember, so it's what I'm going to say, fanniemae.com/UAD. They have all of the specifications and things that we use to write the software to create these reports is public knowledge. It's on that website. We're pulling from the same stuff that you guys can look at. And so that means that a lot of the stuff there is irrelevant to you. You don't necessarily care exactly how the XML is structured, but there are a couple of things there that are very useful to you. One of them would be those sample scenarios. If you still haven't looked at those, take a look. Remember that they are not real reports. They're meant to show off what this report format is capable of. But as you read through it, you're going to go, this would get you called up in front of the board because it's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a real report. It's just trying to show it off. But the one that's really going to be useful is Appendix F. And that is a very long PDF document that goes through every single field in the new report and lays out kind of what the expectations are around that field or that data point, so that if you encounter it in the report and you go, I'm not quite sure what they're asking for, you can go refer to that and it will hopefully it'll illuminate it a little more. We're actually in the middle of, one of these things that we're building out to try to make the experience easier is a help panel in our software, so that when you click in a field, it displays the information from Appendix F1 right there for you contextually, so you don't have to go refer to a separate thing. To that point, get whatever information you can from your software vendor. The GSC publications are talking about the output report, the end result, what they're expecting to see. Something that's kind of weird now about this new paradigm and this new world we're living in is the GSCs didn't care what the input looked like. And so before now, basically all the software vendors were the same. You looked at the 1004 as you wrote into it, and then it printed the 1004 out. It was basically kind of an interactive PDF with some bells and whistles. Everybody's software was basically the same. Now, everybody's software can be either subtly or radically different. We went with an approach that we're calling WYSIWYG. It's not truly WYSIWYG, but it's the kind of closest thing we can manage, where it actually shows you this new dynamic report. It looks a lot like the output report that you're going to print, so that you feel more familiar, because it's more like what you're used to. You're used to a what you see is what you get approach, where you're looking at the 1004, you're writing the 1004, and a 1004 prints out. We went with that approach. Alamode went with a very similar approach, but again, there are some subtle differences. And then Ivory, they got verified. They're a very different approach because they're a cloud-based situation. You're kind of using a web form to generate the report. And then ACI and Bradford both did something very different too, where they didn't build it into their existing software. They built new platforms to support these dynamic reports. And you don't necessarily see that report as you're writing it. You might be able to do a print preview, or you might just wait and see it at the end. And there's kind of a broad spectrum now of what your software can look like and how it can act and how it can work. And so we and all of the other software vendors have been saying, check out what everybody's doing. There is actually kind of some differences in the market now. And one of them, my software might not make sense for you, and that's completely fine. You might really like what Bradford did, where it's this really cool dashboard where there's all this analysis going on, and then it generates the report for you at the end. You might feel more comfortable with my approach, where you basically are working in the report as you're used to it. And as you click this checkbox, the new section appears and you can enter your text or whatever you need to say. So there really is, it kind of runs the gamut, and you should be checking out what everybody has to say about it. But also because each individual software vendor is going to be the expert on how to produce a UAD 3.6 report in their software. I can't tell you how to use Bradford system or ACI system or Ivory system, because it's not this what you see is what you get format. It's a completely different paradigm. They won't necessarily be able to tell you how to use ours, because even though ours is what you see is what you get, it's this weird dynamic thing that changes in response to what you do. And so if you don't quite know which thing to check to get the right section to appear, you want to talk to us. And you also don't want to talk to the GSEs. It's been fun watching the GSEs give presentations on UAD 3.6 and then try to field questions from the audience. And someone will raise their hand and go, well, how does that work? Do I check a box, or do I hit a drop down, or do it? And they go, we don't know. It's going to be what your software vendor does. All they care about is what that end result looks like, and they've set kind of the specification for that. But so now there's more kind of divisions of labor and learning, where you can learn about UAD 3.6 as a whole, but then you also need to learn about how the software works, and it might not be immediately clear who to talk to about which, but all of us want to help you get it figured out. On the lender side, I would say it sounds like a lot of lenders are kind of taking a wait and see approach to it. And I would hope that at this point, they're starting to really pay attention to it. I've attended some lender readiness webinars that were put on earlier this year, just to see what lenders were being told about it. And it was, all the same information we had. But they'd run polls during the webinar, and it would say things like, have you taken any classes on this, or have you reviewed the documentation about this, or do you know that this exists in the first place at all? And the answers to those polls, which got shared, were very troubling. I would have hoped that more people in the lender world were aware that this format existed, let alone were starting to implement it. And so I'm truly hoping that kind of has started to shift over the past few months. But for any lenders or AMCs or, LOS vendors or anything like that, I think we've demonstrated, with Adam and with North State Bank, that it's here and it's happening. It really is going to happen. It's not some hypothetical thing anymore. And we talk about how long that runway is this time compared to the last time. In the software development world, The mandate date is only a year away. That's not a long time when you have to build systems to support it. So I truly hope they have started. All of them are at least investigating, if not actually, writing code to support this new format.
Yeah, I've talked to a few that have, or like appraiser managers that are worried about their LOS system, like being ready, and boy, they're not investing the way that they should. So I think you're spot on with, it's touching a lot of people, not just appraisers, and others are going to have readiness challenges if they aren't, ahead of the curve too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, far be it for me to put words in someone like Lyle's mouth, but I've had conversations with him about it, and they seem pretty clear they're not changing that date. I keep seeing social media about how, oh, this is just going to get delayed. They keep delaying it. They're going to delay it more. It's never been delayed. They've never announced a date and not stuck to it. The most they've done is say, well, we think, maybe Q1 is when this will happen. And then eventually they narrow it down to, well, it'll be in January. Okay, it'll be January 26th. But they've never announced a date for UAD 3.6 and then turned around and said, actually, we're not ready yet. It's not going to happen until a year from now. They've been very upfront about it all. And my understanding is that it's not necessarily a timeline that the GSEs themselves got full control over, that they have pressure from FHFA and others, that these are the dates. This is what it's going to be. As far as they're concerned, these dates aren't changing. So I think if anybody's watching and is counting on the dates changing, that could be a mistake.
Good to know. Really good to know. Hopefully people make it to the back end of this podcast and get that note, and we'll try to make sure it's prominent there, because I think Brian Reynolds was saying the same thing on his podcast, and really a public service announcement more than anything. Like, hey, I think it has generally been the right thing to do to observe from the sidelines and watch. But be familiar, and then when it's time to jump all in, it's time. And I think we're approaching that, and you're not going to be able to ignore this and never have to deal with it, most likely. Remington, I'll ask just kind of I'm interested in your perspective. This is one like a negative that I have heard a lot about these 3.6 forms. It's one I've cued in on, I know that there's probably not a lot of basis in my concern one way or another, but so many extra fields and data collection on site, the amount of time it would take, how much that has or doesn't have to do with value. I'm curious, those sorts of fields that people are referencing there, door heights and that sort of thing. Do you have any perspective on those, the requirements of them to be in there? Or are there a lot of fields like that when you're on site that you need to be adding into? Are they more voluntary than mandatory? Those sorts of things. What's your perspective?
Sure. So there is a lot of talk about, if you compare the old 1004 to this new report, the 1004 has something like 500 fields on it. The new URAR has like 3,000 or 4,000 like possible fields, but that's an important word, possible. You didn't have to necessarily fill out every field on the 1004 if you didn't need to, if it wasn't relevant to your assignment, and you don't have to here either. And the thing here is that this URAR replaces the 1004, the 1073, the 2055, the manufactured home, the 1025. There's all these optional sections. Some of them you probably won't even see at all unless you're doing that type of assignment. If it's not a manufactured home, you're not even going to see the manufactured home section and fields, but they're still part of that data set. They're still part of that 3,000 field count. And so I think there's been a lot of consternation there, kind of unnecessarily. But then to your point, there are new data points where now they're asking that there's a checkbox for, is broadband internet available at the property? And it's just a yes, no checkbox. And you might not even deal with that at the property. You'll probably look it up. There's the FCC has a website where you can look up for any address what broadband internet possibilities are available there. And they're not asking you to verify that the internet is working. They're just asking, is it available? So it's not like you're having to do some kind of really detailed home inspection and check whether that's working or turned on. Another one that has gotten a lot of attention is the front door elevation. How high from grade is the front door? And people are really anxious about that one. But if you actually look at the field, it's not asking you like to the millimeter. It's asking you, is it between 1 and 2 feet? Is it between 5 and 6 feet? Is it more than 10 feet? Is it 0? They're not looking for anything more than necessarily, you can just eyeball it and make the selection. And then another one would be ceiling heights. They want to know how high the ceilings are. Are they 8-foot ceilings, 9-foot ceiling, 10-foot ceiling, vaulted? But they're not asking you that for each individual like room. It's kind of level by level or structure by structure. So there's really there's a little bit more. It's a little bit of a change to your habit maybe, or a change of pace. But at the end of the day, it's not really asking you for a bunch more that you weren't already doing. And otherwise, a ton of it is, the idea was, we want you to have room for anything you might want to talk about. But if you don't need to talk about it, if it's not relevant to your opinion of value, or it's not relevant to this assignment, just don't use it. If you look at that, the new comp grid it could be gigantic. If you actually printed off every possible field, it goes from the half page that the 1004s is to 3 or 4 full-size pages where it can be that big, but most of it's optional. If you're not doing an appraisal on a Native American reservation, that section's not relevant. If you're not doing, if there are no outbuildings, if there are no ADUs, those sections aren't relevant. But if they are relevant to you, they want them to have first-party support, so that you're not trying to cram information about an ADU into a 1004 that barely cares about it and doesn't really give you a place to talk about it and forces you to rely on addenda. So that, I think that's, people aren't quite understanding that paradigm yet, because again, it is such a change. It's such a new thing. And I think once people get used to it, again, I think it's going to be better for them.
That makes a lot of sense. It's the getting used to it part, I think, that is, you're exactly right. It just takes exposure. Obviously, got to have hands on it and eyes on it and be able to interact with it to get that sense of, okay, what is this really like? Just because it could be 3 or 4 pages long for the adjustment, grid, for example, doesn't mean it's going to be, likely to be, or probably ever will be for a given assignment. It just encapsulates, all of the different property types into this single, report style. And it's interesting too, Remington. I mean, as we look at maybe wrapping up, we know there's a lot of work to still be done, and we don't want all of SFREP users like angry at us for keeping you from making the next needed iterations on the software. So the question I have, though, is we're obviously very focused in this moment in 3.6, current, transition and that sort of a thing. But I'm curious, if we zoom out a little bit, what's your perspective on where appraisal, report writing, analysis, where do things go into the future? We've obviously got emergent artificial intelligence. This data set will allow for integrations that you've already touched on, in ways that we haven't had previously. But just would love your broader perspective. Of course, everybody's crystal ball is a little fuzzy when looking into the future, but would love your perspective on what do you think things look like as we look forward in appraising?
I think you're going to start seeing, just at a basic level, more dynamic reports. This UAD URAR that changes in response to your assignment and only outputs what you actually need or use in a given assignment. I think we're going to start seeing more of those. We certainly have plans for ways we can leverage this dynamic report engine that we've built to offer more reports for other assignment types. We get asked a lot at shows and things, well, okay, there's this new dynamic report. What about for my non-lending work? You can't use the new URAR for non-lending purposes. It's a mortgage appraisal report. And so there's a lot of interest already in things like a general purpose dynamic appraisal report that kind of follows the same idea. And we're looking into that. We're looking into, a number of different things. And then I think that, people are certainly exploring what AI can do and how that can be a tool that's useful to them. I think there's a lot of leeriness maybe over the idea of AI replacing appraisers, and I don't think that's a thing that's going to happen. I think that at the end of the day, an AI agent isn't going to get licensed in your state and start signing reports and be called up in front of the board if, something's not quite right. So I think there's job security there for appraisers, but I think that AI might be able to help them do their jobs a little faster or a little more simply, help them out in ways. And so I think it's possible to leverage those tools without being replaced by them. I don't think anybody really wants to replace appraisers. I know there's been a lot of chatter about, oh, well, UAD 3.6, it's so that they can replace us. They can just scrape all our data and then they don't need us anymore. I truly don't think that's what their goal is. I don't think they would have spent millions of dollars in the past decade developing a new reporting format designed around an appraiser writing the report just to then get rid of appraisers. And if nothing else, at the very nitty-gritty level, they want fresh data. And they're not going to get that fresh data unless appraisers go out and visit the property and confirm that the property condition is what it is and not what some model running on a server somewhere thinks it is. So I hope that people aren't as afraid as they maybe are. I don't think they need to be quite so afraid. I think that there's a lot of tools and useful things out there to them, and that they will be appraising for a long, long time. I've also seen a lot of appraisers say, who've been doing this for a long time, yeah, my dad told me that appraisers would be dead in 20 years, and that was 40 years ago when he was an appraiser, and guess what? I'm still here. I think that's going to be what happens moving forward indefinitely, with this new reporting format or not.
Well, Remington Jones, the man of the hour. We feel very fortunate that you were able to carve out an hour with us with your extensive press junket. Now that that you've gotten this delivered, it is. I know you've done this, been in this for a very long time. 16 plus years. A lot of hard work and well earned accomplishment here with Adam in getting that first one across and just being ready for this, in stewarding in the next generation of appraisal reporting. So thank you and congratulations. And we look forward to talking to you soon once the next 10,000 have been delivered.
Wouldn't that be something? It's very exciting.
We set the bar high around here, Remington. So you get 10,000 in, and we'll talk again.
Okay,
just
that's
kidding,
fair.
of course. But yeah, I just wanted to echo Mark's sentiment. Really do appreciate you making the time. It's we want to learn and understand together what's happening and how do we adapt. In this transitionary period. And you've said a lot of stuff that really has broadened my own perspective and kind of deepened it as far as understanding how is this really working, kind of boots on the ground or at the report level. And so I would love to have a follow-up at some point with you as well, for sure.
Absolutely. I'm available. It's been a pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
All right. Till next time. Happy Thanksgiving all.
You too. Thank you.